All right, so today we're going to talk about how to build muscle. Now, I think in order to understand how to build muscle, you really need to understand why the body builds muscle. So, basically, hypertrophy or muscle growth is just a biological response from the body to the correct stimulus. So when you give the body the stimulus that it needs, that's the response you're going to get. Same thing with burning fat, provided that everything's working properly. If you give your body the correct stimulus, it'll burn fat. I guess I can go ahead and throw out there, like if you're primarily want to get stronger, but you don't want to increase in size, understanding these principles are how you do that. So like when I have an athlete or a client rather who's maybe a professional dancer, like a cheerleader or someone that does ballet, they might want to improve their strength or their conditioning without an increase in weight or size. And you can do that if you understand a lot of these things. Along those lines, like maybe you have a boxer or someone who does some kind of MMA thing and they want to be able to produce more force, but they don't want to go up in a weight class. If you understand these principles, it's not hard to accomplish those goals. Along those lines also, if you have someone, or if you are someone who would like to increase their size and their power, it's the same. You have to understand the same principles. So you apply them different ways. But so what we're going to talk about today, very quickly, is how training age, muscle type, a little bit of structure, and how at the end I'm going to tie it up with just understanding a little bit about volume, intensity, and frequency. How all those things work together to help you make progress with resistance training. So we'll start with training age, and what you have to understand about that is the lower your training age, the less sophisticated your training needs to be. This is tricky, and especially if you're someone that works with clients or if you train kids. I've seen a lot of examples of people who they hear about what professionals do or they hear about what college kids do and they try to do that with like high school athletes. If you have a high school athlete who's never touched a weight, they don't need to be worried about what someone at the college level or the professional level is doing at all. Not even a little bit. They need to be learning how to lift. That's like, you got to get the basics in. A good example of this that I harp on a lot, that I've harped on a lot for a long time, is I've known a lot of high school athletes who did cleans their very first day in the gym. They've never done deadlifts, they've never done front squats, and they start off with cleaning a barbell off the floor their first day. So if I'm not splitting hairs, I'm going to tell you that is monumentally stupid. Now, maybe some kids are fine, they don't get injured, whatever. That's not helping their performance in any way at all. And if you're thinking about, if you think you want to do cleans or have your athletes do cleans because you think it's going to make them faster, there is literature that supports that, but it's important to understand that if they still have a lot of room to increase just their absolute strength, that's going to do more to make them more explosive and fast than doing really bad cleans without a proper skill base. So I always get people's deadlift up first, and I make sure they know how to front squat, and I'll spend as much time on that as I need before we'll start doing cleans. We'll do another video about that sometime. But so basically, if you are someone or you have clients who are of a very low training age, meaning like 1 to 2 years, they should respond really well to very basic stimulus. They just have to be consistent. So always, regardless of who they are, the volume, the intensity, and the training frequency has to be appropriate for them and for their goals. That'll be different from person to person and from category to category. So you might have like an 80-year-old female client, and then you might have an 18-year-old kid who is about to go to college for the first time that plays, basketball or football or hockey or baseball or whatever. Those are very different populations, but for both of them, understanding the volume, understanding the intensity, and understanding the training frequency, that's key to the results both of them are going to get. So with training age, if I have someone who's brand new, 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 12 reps is great. They should see good results on that. As long as they have any kind of inclination towards resistance training. If you get someone who is, either they have like a bad nervous system, or they have a whole lot of slow twitch fibers, like they're really more of an endurance athlete, they're not going to see the same results as someone with a lot of fast twitch fibers or someone, those people are mixed, but they can still see, progress. And that's still a good place to start them, because before you get into more complicated things, you have to build that foundation. So virtually everybody that I start, it doesn't matter how old they are, and it doesn't even matter if they, let's say I've got like a 45-year-old male who played football in high school, but he hasn't really done anything since then. His training age is 0. Okay, I don't care if his football team was the best in the state, blah blah blah, whatever. If it was 20 years ago and he hasn't done any resistance training in the interim, what he did when he was young is going to have a positive impact on his nervous system. His learning curve is going to be a lot shorter. He's going to get there faster compared to someone else his age who has no base. But his training age is still 0, so we're starting with the basics and we'll gradually progress. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but basically, if I put someone on a volume program or an accumulation program, a lot of them will look like 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 12 reps at first, and then the next phase is probably going to be something like 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 8 reps. That's like a introduction to a more of an intensity type of thing, but it's still not very intense, because that 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 8 reps is like an appropriate increase in intensity for someone at a certain point, but you want to be careful about it. What I'm not going to do with someone who's new, who has like a low training age, is something like 6 sets of 3. They're going to need to go through a process before they can tap into those motor units. The reason for that is, if they're a novice, they probably don't really know how to recruit those fast twitch fibers, so you have to teach that to the body. And even if they are very strong, I mean, you will occasionally see people who, they might not have a lot of weight training experience, but maybe they might just be genetically gifted, they might just be strong. You still need to prepare the connective tissue for the load. So if you got somebody who just seems real strong and you try to just throw something at them, you're not helping them build a good foundation. So now, if I have someone who's been training for 5 or 6 years, and they're in shape, I won't start them off with that 10 to 12 reps. However, if I have someone who's been training for 5 or 6 years, and say it's like the beginning of the off season, and they've taken some time off and they've gotten deconditioned, I will start them at something like that, because I'm focusing on building up their base first, or reestablishing their base before we work at higher intensities. So obviously a lot of things go into this, but the main point I want to make right now is, if the training age is low, they're going to respond really well to very simple programs. They don't need complicated programs. I started to say this earlier. The danger for a lot of coaches and trainers is they learn about these cool programs and they want to apply them, but you have to have a qualified client. So a good example is like chains on a bench press or a squat. You really shouldn't do that if they can't press or squat twice their body weight. There might be exceptions, but that's a pretty good baseline. So if you have like a 105-pound kid who's struggling with 85 pounds, he doesn't need chains on the bar. Okay, you can use your own judgment on that, but just like you're still building his base strength, you don't need to worry about like the strength curve at that point, in my opinion. So, and then as they increase, we will increase the intensity, meaning we're going to do heavier loads and less reps. Because as the training age increases, they're not going to respond as well to those lighter intensities with like the 10 to 12 for the most part. So the second thing that we're going to talk about is muscle type. So this is something that can go pretty deep in the weeds. In short terms, I've talked about this a lot. You probably already know something about this or have heard about it, but just in case you are a complete novice and you're watching my channel for the first time, fast twitch fibers are the fibers that have the most potential for growth. Okay, but they're also known as like high threshold motor units. They're very difficult to recruit. You have to be very deliberate about it, and you got to have enough of a base to be good at recruiting them. So again, if I have someone who's never lifted weights, I'm not starting them on 10 sets of 3. But if I have somebody who has a real good base, I might, and they're new to me. I'm still gonna get an idea where they're at first. So we might go through like a training phase, but if they can demonstrate they've done things of that intensity and it's appropriate for their goals and their temperament and everything else, we might pursue that. But Now, slow twitch fibers are fibers that are more gifted for endurance, and they are not nearly as gifted for growth. Okay, if you have a lot of slow twitch fibers, if you have a client who has a lot of slow twitch fibers, that's definitely going to affect what type of training you're going to respond to. So if you have someone who's gifted and they gain muscle really easily, they probably have a lot of fast twitch fibers. If you feel like you're not gifted in that way, there's a lot of nuances to this. Both those people can be really good athletes. They're probably not going to be good athletes in the same sports. So the person with a lot of fast twitch fibers, hockey, football, potentially powerlifting or shot put, depending on the type of fibers, maybe even discus or javelin. If someone's got a lot of slow twitch fibers, you're probably looking more like bicycling, kayaking, endurance sports, possibly things like fencing, depending on what their interests are. But if you're trying to build muscle and they have a lot of slow twitch fibers, they're not going to respond to the same thing that the guy with fast twitch fibers is going to. That's a reason why when you're either learning about training or trying to pick programs for yourself, you need to be a little bit cautious about looking at people at the gym and seeing the people with the best physiques and trying to do what they do. Because unless you're built like them, you're not going to see the same results. You might be able to build a great physique that you're really proud of, but you're probably going to have to go about it a different way. So, and just in general terms, if someone has a lot of slow twitch fibers, their nutrition is going to be different. There's a good chance they're going to require more carbohydrates to build muscle than somebody with a lot of fast twitch fibers, and they're also probably going to need to do a lot more reps. Okay, so I'll talk about that more another time, but basically like your average reps are going to be higher than someone with a lot of fast twitch fibers if building muscle is the primary goal. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about real quick is how structure can affect building muscle. All right, so, and there's quite a bit that can go into this. Obviously, the larger frame someone has, the more potential they're going to have to build muscle. That's simple. Having said that, some people who don't appear to have large frames can still build quite a bit of muscle. They just have to be real deliberate about it and be careful who they listen to. So when I was like a new trainee and I think I bought my first gym membership, I was talking to one of the personal trainers. This was years before I started training professionally, and I had a young guy tell me that with my frame, about the most I'd probably be able to carry was like 170 pounds. I don't know why he thought that, but that was his opinion, so I kind of believed that for a while, but at my peak, I've been anywhere from like 195 to 205 with good body fat percentage. We won't talk about the off-peak periods where the weight was higher than that, but when I was times when I've been in like, everything was kind of lined up, anywhere from 195 to 205 is pretty easy, and probably if building muscle had been a primary goal, I'm very confident it could have been, higher than that, so. It depends on what your goals are. So, but when we're talking about structure, part of what we're looking at is somebody, if you're looking at the legs, someone with like very long femurs, they're going to have a harder time squatting than somebody with like really short femurs. It doesn't mean they can't squat, it doesn't mean they can't get strong, but that bone takes up a lot of space, and it's not going to appear as muscular as somebody with a shorter leg. Somebody with a really broad clavicle is going to have an easier time building a wide back than somebody with a real narrow clavicle. Same thing with the clavicle. People with very broad clavicles are probably going to build more impressive chest muscles than people with real narrow clavicles. A lot of different things can go into this. The other thing, I've talked about this elsewhere, is if you understand like the difference, the ratio between the muscle belly and the tendon length. Because the longer the muscle belly is, the more successful someone's going to be in growing a muscle that appears to be very large. However, the longer the muscle belly and the shorter the tendon, the less force they're going to produce. And this is one reason why we occasionally hear about people who have like great physiques and they seem very athletic, but they are not as useful on a farm or a ranch as someone might suspect. It's because of the way they're structured. Well, actually, a lot of that's because they don't train their hands and their feet. If they would do some grip work and get like not wear stupid shoes, they could be quite useful on a farm or a ranch. But that's part of it. The other thing is just like people who have like longer tendons are going to do a better job of producing force because the tendon's part of that, although they might not build a muscle that's as aesthetically impressive. Now, for all these things, so we got training age, we got muscle type, we got structure. None of that is important if your volume, your intensity, and your frequency suck. Okay? So if you have a great program written by a great coach, and it's for 4 days a week, and you do it 1 to 2 days a week, don't call that coach and tell him his program sucks. Okay, it's you have to meet the baseline that you need to see progress, and that's a little bit different for everybody. But regardless of that, you still have a baseline. You have to meet that in order to see progress. So the volume has to be appropriate. It's got to at least meet the threshold to force your body to see adaptations. The intensity's got to be enough to make your body think you need to grow muscle, and the training frequency's got enough for the same thing. So I'll give you a bad example. If somebody, they want to build muscle and they're going to go to the gym and they're going to do one set of 5 reps with a weight. So 1 set of 5 reps, that might represent for some people anywhere from 90 to 95% of what they could do for 1 rep. It'd be a little bit different for some people, but we'll just kind of go with around 90%. So if they're using a weight that they could do for 10 to 12 reps, but they're only doing 5 reps, that means the intensity is not enough to recruit the kind of fibers you're trying to recruit to grow. So the volume's not high enough, the intensity's not high enough, and if you only do it 1 day a week, none of those things are lining up to tell your body to build muscle. Now, if you go to the gym and you do 10 sets of 3, that's enough volume to build muscle if the intensity is appropriate and you have the right kind of fibers. And then if you're doing a program like that 4 days a week and you're recovering properly, that's another key thing, there's a good chance you're going to see some kind of results. Now, that's not the ultimate muscle building routine, it's an extreme one. Most people are going to do best with sets of 6 to 8 reps, that's what we call functional hypertrophy, or things of 10 to 12 reps. However, let's say that you really enjoy strength training, you like picking up heavy things or pushing heavy things or whatever, but you also want to build muscle. There are loading protocols you can do where you do a few sets of those heavier reps, whether it's 3 reps or 6 reps or 8 reps, whatever, and then you, with the same exercise, you switch to higher repetition brackets. So I've done that a lot where I might do 6 or 8 sets of something with 3 repetitions, and then take some weight off the bar and do 2 to 4 sets of 6 to 8 or 10 to 12 reps. Because those earlier sets are going to excite your nervous system, you're going to recruit more high threshold motor units. You're also inducing cumulative fatigue, and all those things can kind of pile up to build muscle. So, okay, I feel like I've used up all my words for the day. So, if you want to build muscle, and especially if you're trying, you feel like you're not seeing anything, there's a lot of things that can go into that. But before you try to get exotic with blood work and worrying about your testosterone levels or something, make sure your training age is, understand your training age. Make sure what you're doing is appropriate for your training age. I'll throw one more example out there. If you've been lifting for 5 or 10 years and you're still doing 10 or 12 reps, you need to learn about programming. And if you're a personal trainer and you're doing that to your clients, you need to learn about programming, because there's a lot of stuff you can do. The thing people adapt to the fastest is how many reps they do. Once they adapt to those reps, it's not really that beneficial. So then muscle type, for some people they don't need to worry about that, but if you're really trying to create a dramatic change and you have enough years of training under your belt to where you can really recruit motor units, understanding your muscle type can really help. And then just structure. You have to, a lot of people when they go to the gym, they try to hit each body part from every angle possible, and that is basically for people on steroids. It's also not effective. So you should just kind of basically build things up to a point where they're good, and then have someone if you're looking at physique stuff, have someone take a look at you that knows how to judge those things. They can tell you need to bring up this or that, then bring up this or that, and keep your base and go be happy. So, okay, no more words. That's it. Go train. Thanks.